All right, that was Facebook Connect, or at least the opening keynote. Welcome, everyone. I am Jamie from UploadVR, Senior Editor, and we are here in the UploadVR studio. We're going to be spending the next hour or so talking over announcements from the big show earlier today. We just saw Mark Zuckerberg announce a whole bunch of things. He was on screen pretty much the entire 90-minute running time. Top of the bill there, he announced the new name for Facebook, Meta. And to talk about these things, I am joined by one and only Ian Hamilton. Say hello, Ian.
Hello, everyone. Quite a big day. We're obviously in Oculus Quest 2s right now with our hand tracking, the current state of the art in terms of avatar expression that we're actually able to get out of these systems in our standalone studio that's built in Unity with, Oculus APIs. I don't know what. Heaney's using Unity for it, but we still have Oculus APIs built on top of it.
Heaney's a smart man. And Heaney, speaking of Heaney, our technology expert, I'm going to call him, will be joining us very shortly. He's just getting the last few things done. Dave Station, thanks for the donation there. Good to see you. Thanks for $5 there. That's really nice of you. I've got on screen the first thing we're going to be talking about today. Meta. This is not just some new weird company. This is not also some obscure AR company that made a headset a couple of years ago that everyone forgot about. This is the new name for Facebook, right, Ian?
Yep. He said something at the end there of how the rebranding is gonna work, but Facebook kind of uses its brands in different ways, kind of like moves down the line, going to use other brands when a particular brand fails them or doesn't quite reflect the image of what they want to go through going forward. But yeah, Meta is going to be it. I'm reminded I, of course, talked to, I think, Maron Gribitz was his name. He was the founder of the previous iteration of the Meta AR company. And gosh, there's a whole storied history there where they got a lot of investment. They had this kind of bulky AR, PC-powered AR glasses that I remember I would go back and do these demos, and I'm like, are you going to get really good tracking for this system? Because the tracking is not good right now. And it was just like that every year. Every demo was like that year after year. That's my most lasting memory of Meta. Did you ever try Meta, Jamie?
I did not try Meta, but they will live on in our hearts, I suppose. So, let's run down. We're going to have Heaney here in a bit, and like I said, he annoyingly correctly guessed the name Meta. I don't know if it's a guess. I don't know his sources, but he said it was going to be Meta. I was convinced it was going to be Horizon. In fact, I thought for sure they would have this big flashy opening trailer, and there'd be like all the different Horizon apps they've got running today, and then it would say Facebook Connect, and then you'd see it like swap out to Horizon Connect, and then you'd see Zuckerberg go, "Hi, welcome to Horizon Connect." But I was wrong. It actually came at the very end of the show, and it was Meta, not Horizon, which was disappointing. But the key point here is that Meta is the new umbrella term, but Facebook is still there as a social platform, right?
Yeah, so the thing that Facebook I think is dealing with here is it's pretty significant, or that Meta is dealing with here is pretty substantial, and I'm going to be sort of thinking this through live with our audience out there, trying to kind of digest what Facebook or Meta is trying to do here. And they've outlined this vision. They spent so much time in this entire keynote outlining their vision for like worlds that you go into from VR headsets or AR glasses or flat screens, and you get into this interconnected space. Facebook kept saying they see themselves as doing some of the stitching technologies to make all of this stuff function. And right at the offset of the whole thing, Zuckerberg had that screen where he showed out the 4 or 5 key technologies that Facebook could provide. Avatars being one of them, interoperability being something that Facebook needs to ensure that it supports going forward in taking digital assets from one place to another. I thought it was really weird. I know that there's a lot of people out there that were groaning in our audience. I'm sure the moment they showed NFTs up in the virtual goods that you can take from device to device. But it's Facebook kind of owning the thing I try to get across in a couple previous conversations, where the legacy company that Facebook has isn't necessarily compatible with the way these interactions are going to change going forward. So, like, we talked about this a lot before we even came in here. I think Heaney's probably joining us right now. But what is the correct function for how AR glasses show you the name of another person that you come across on the street? Do you see a name tag floating above that random person when you're wearing AR glasses? Or does it require that person to identify themselves in order to see who they are? Because right now in VR, you see a little name tag above everyone you go at. And like, it's perfectly within Facebook's like they could make it possible for you to tag people off the street, but they're choosing not to. Like that, I specifically asked Meta this week whether they would have kind of auto tagging of people you see on the street when you're out and about and walking around, and that's not something they're investing in. They're not having that technology when that is a cornerstone technology from the existing Facebook platform. And what we're seeing today with Meta is they're kind of tossing that aside, and Mark Zuckerberg is saying, yeah, actually, there's lots of things about that existing company that aren't compatible with where we want to be in the next 10, 15 years.
We've got David Heaney here now. Hello, David. How are you doing? I feel like you might be muted.
Yeah, I think you're muted.
But while he's unmuting himself, I will just say he's probably very happy because, as I said at the start of the show, he won the bet we had going on between whether it was going to be Horizon or Meta, and that probably means I have to do some sort of forfeit in the future next time we meet up in real life. But I'm not looking forward to that. But
in my defense, I did have the headline, "Is Facebook going Meta?" up on our website via an editorial a couple days ago. So, yeah, it seemed the likeliest thing. And of course, we knew this because Facebook had Mark Zuckerberg had owned that URL, meta.com and meta.org prior to today's shift. So it makes a lot of sense that they would sort of hand off to that.
And so what about this? And we're going to get to the hardware in a second. I know you guys are talking about whether we saw new hardware today. We did, and we'll be talking about that very soon on the docket. But there was this insinuation in the Verge report that first leaked this idea that they were going to change the name, that this wasn't so much about this. Well, this wasn't just about like reflecting on the future that's going to be driven by the metaverse, but also the idea
Any luck now?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you. Heaney, how did you feel about winning the bet?
Yeah, it's interesting. It makes sense in Meta if they really are focusing on the metaverse.
Yeah, well, yeah, but you also won the bet. But but getting back to it, yeah, just the idea that not just is it reflecting the future of where they're going to go with the company, but also the idea that maybe they want to get away from some of the past insinuations that have been leveled at Facebook. And is this the right move for that? Is it a strong enough move for that? Is it going to work? Heaney, what do you think on that front?
Yeah, as I said in our last discussion when we were talking about this, I don't think it's going to work for anyone who's kind of a tech journalist or someone who's in the tech media, someone who follows technology closely and is involved in all of these scandals. But the question is, for the average tech consumer that just buys products and kind of has a loose understanding of who owns what and the kind of previous actions of these parent companies, will they care? In 10 years' time, will they even remember that Meta used to be Facebook, or will it be something that is on the top of their mind? That is the question, and we can only really find out over time how many people in the mass market will purchase these products from this company run by Mark Zuckerberg. Because as Kara Swisher said in her latest column, the problem in many ways for people isn't Facebook, it's Mark Zuckerberg. And it's his leadership of the company and his decisions around things like content moderation that have kind of caused a lot of these scandals. So I do wonder if the problem here was more the CEO than the branding of the company itself.
And Ian, I'm going to come to you, but I'm going to kind of like bleed into what's the second topic of today as well, which is that at some point, somewhere in this conference, they kind of buried the lead a little and insinuated that to some degree in the next year they are like, I think the exact quote is something along the lines of they are looking into different ways to log in based on it kind of suggested that maybe outside of a Facebook login, there might be another way to log into your Quest system. And I think those
Yeah.
are two very important points to key together. What do you make of that?
Yeah, all right. Well, I don't have the exact quote written down this moment, but yeah, it's sort of they're signaling that they're open to logging in to your Quest with an account that isn't your personal Facebook account. They're kind of indicating that could be your work account, which, why is that a big deal? Like, how attached does that need to be to your real identity? Or can you like be a single developer working on your own and log into the headset with made up details, or do you have to verify your information? Of course, Heaney has the article this week that for side loading on Oculus Quest, they're now verifying a phone number or credit card details. And that step being verified and sort of being required is a pretty clear verification step that kind of you've got to be backed by a real identity in order to use these devices. I threw up this quote that I heard from Andrew Bosworth this week on a briefing with journalists. And I threw it up because I think it summarizes how significant the shift is here over to Meta, why they're focusing on it, and also just the kind of issues at play when you're using these devices. Like, over the last year, did Facebook do some soul searching? Did Mark Zuckerberg and Andrew Bosworth do some soul searching on just exactly how much of your identity is needed with you when you're using these technologies out and about? Like, this question where he posed on this call: to what extent do we want anybody, companies or governments, to be supervising our synchronous conversations in the digital equivalent of the city park? So right now, Facebook has two modes of interacting with its virtual world, its all its technologies for the metaverse. You've got the Ray-Ban Stories sunglasses, and you've got the Quest 2 VR headset that sells for $299. And both of these have technologies in them, like the Quest has technology in them where if you're in an online social space with other people, you see the name of the person, whatever they've got as their Oculus ID, over the person. And then there's a rolling buffer of like 10 to 15 seconds or something like that of recorded interactions happening with everyone you interact with in Horizon spaces. And at any time someone harasses you or upsets you, you can hit the report button, and that rolling body-worn camera that you've got recording those interactions as a buffer gets sent off to Facebook, an authority, as Facebook put it, to review and see what needs to happen to that account. Is that the type of interaction we want when we're out on the street, walking around the real physical world, and you're just wearing sunglasses, or some people are not wearing any technology at all? Is that the same is technology going to function the exact same way? Is there a 10 to 15 second buffer of camera footage that's going to be recorded by whatever device is on your head as we go around in the next 5-10 years? I think Facebook might have done some soul searching on whether their existing Facebook account requirements and whether like all those login details, all that info is needed to walk around with you everywhere on these glasses that you take out into the real world.
See, the thing to me, and it was a really interesting way this was all worded, because we ended up like having a lot of back and forth in our Slack channel as it was announced, because we literally didn't know to what area what Zuckerberg was talking about applied to. And to take it back from the kind of Galaxy Brain stuff from a second, I remember when Sony was releasing the PlayStation 4, they kind of like slipped into their like announcement conference that like you were going to need PlayStation Plus, which was a premium subscription service that already existed on PlayStation 3. But for the first time, you would need PlayStation Plus for online gaming on the PlayStation 4. And this felt like a very, very similar move in terms of just how subtly it was kind of just put in there to some degree in the conference, because they don't want to make a song and dance about it potentially, because it's kind of somewhat of an admission of defeat for them. Is that a fair way to put it, Heaney, do you think?
Yeah, I think the wording is really interesting here when it comes to other than your personal Facebook account. And I guess kind of linking it back into what we just heard about Meta. If Facebook is now just another one of the apps or brands under the Meta umbrella, is it possible here that he's going to reintroduce Oculus accounts as something that you have that is separate to Facebook? Because under this new structure, there's no reason that Facebook, the app, the social network, is any more significant now than Instagram or WhatsApp. And it's not like you need an Instagram app to use a VR headset. But I guess the one thing I would say here is, if you're someone who wasn't comfortable with having a Facebook account, I'm not sure why having a Oculus account or a Meta account is going to be fundamentally any different. Maybe if your issues were around the fact you didn't want it to be tied to social media, sure. But for a lot of people, it's just that they don't want to have an account with this specific company. And I don't think renaming it or having one sort of subsection of the company in VR or AR have a separate account system is really going to change that much.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
There's a couple things going on here that I wonder what Facebook is trying to do. Because I forget, there's just this fundamental misunderstanding. Like, I don't know what information is stored in my Facebook account anymore. Like, I don't know how many years of texts, photos, all that stuff is stored in like various repositories within Facebook. And I think that's the thing about this metaverse concept that kind of it feels like we've just witnessed a master stroke in marketing on a scale I can't really fathom, where Mark Zuckerberg and a couple other executives at Facebook started using this term metaverse over the last 6 to 9 months and just set off round after round after round of media to be written about this term again and again and again, and then announce that the company name is this term that they've primed everyone to be using for the last 6 to 9 months of time. So everyone is kind of ready to use this term, and they've just spent an hour and a half showing you all the way it defies distance, the way it lets you teleport from place to place, all the things that you might be able to get out of it. But there's a comment here that I want to go up here to mention that I want to recognize, where it says, quote, "We're not going to do mass surveillance. You're going to do it for us. I can't wait." And I hate like over summarizing the technology there. I see there's a comment from Guy. Should we read off that one? Can you read that off?
I think there's one comment we should probably mention first. I don't know what the source here is, but Jeff Messer says, interesting, Zuck's newsletter flat out states, that means that over time you won't need a Facebook account to use our other services. And obviously we've just jumped into VR here. We're not sure what newsletter Jeff's referring to, but if that is accurate, then that sounds like what he is saying is what we were discussing before, where Facebook is not a more significant account than Instagram or Oculus or any of the WhatsApp or any of other Facebook's services. So it does seem to talk to the idea that you will either have some sort of meta account that is used for all of these things, which I don't see why that's not just a Facebook account by a different name, or that there will be a kind of separate Oculus sub-account.
Because what do you sign into on Meta? Sorry,
well, no, I'm watching the commenters and the way they're sort of thinking through the way some of this stuff breaks reality. Like it completely shifts kind of the way a lot of things can function. Kyle and I joked about it in the past. Like, do you get a little notification on your glasses that someone has like requested your identity? Like, are you walking around in the real world and you just suddenly get a pop-up on your device? Oh no, there's someone wants to know who I am. Like how does that actually function? The thing I want to get across about the marketing story that I was kind of getting across, if the conversation is about places you go and the benefits that we get out of it, we're not talking as much about what the word meta means and how this technology fundamentally functions. The idea is that, in my opinion, that there's meta layer of information following us around everywhere we go, and whoever has the largest repository of details can give you the most amount of context about the things you want to do throughout your day as possible. So Apple knows where you want to go, how much money is in your bank account, how much money is left on your credit card, because if you've got the Apple Pay credit card. They know your travel time to your next location. There's all this context that follows you around on your phone already. That meta layer of information is going to be brought to bear selectively over the next 10 years, however Facebook wills it. So, like, they can say, we're not looking to do facial recognition right now. We're not going to identify tagging faces on, we have no interest in that. But there's no reason why 5 or 10 years, once everyone's acclimated to it, they couldn't turn that into an opt-in feature. And that's, I think, that's what people have to remember is there's nothing to what Heaney's saying, like that those piles and piles of information about us that can be used in creepy or not creepy ways is up entirely to these organizations, whether they actually want to do it or not.
So, kind of moving on a bit.
I was just going to say to our
go for it.
commenters, no, I was not kissing Ian on the cheek there. I was turning off my dehumidifier again to prevent all of you having the most horrible loud background noise ever. But yeah, just to pull on one thing the commenters are pointing out here, this idea people are really bringing up over and over again, that what they want from this account change is the ability to just have a virtual reality presence without having this profile on a social media account. And so I think realistically, that's probably what we're looking at here and what the commenters are looking for, in the sense of not having their face and real name listed on Facebook along with other data they don't want to have.
So talking about like the comments, going back to the start of the stream, a lot of people came straight in from the keynote saying, "Oh, kind of worst connect ever. Wasn't really enjoying this one. Didn't think there was much to talk about." To Ian's point, there's this idea of like this marketing masterstroke, as he put it. That sure, in terms of like the short-term, hard-hitting announcements in terms of hardware and games and everything like that, there wasn't too much today. But actually, the kind of things we're talking about right now are kind of like underpinning what might be the most important stuff they've ever announced at Connect. It's just not necessarily in the here and now the most exciting stuff, because the concept of the metaverse is still very, very far out, even in Facebook's own terms. But putting a line under that kind of stuff now, let's get to some of that short-term, quick hit, exciting stuff that people were really coming into the stream for. Starting with Project Cambria, from the new VR headset that they announced towards the end of the show today, which was kind of what we were expecting, kind of not. Obviously, if you've been following Upload for the past week or two, there have been some leaks around this concept of an Oculus Quest Pro, which is a term we've been using quite a lot on and off for the past year or so. Something that executives confirmed existed earlier in the year, but didn't really give us a very solid date of when it would be coming. We did wonder if Connect would be that kind of same kind of treatment that we got for the Oculus Quest 2 last year, where they teased it for a couple of weeks and then it came out, and then the thing was out like a month later, if not a couple of weeks later. This felt much more like going back to earlier Connects, where there's a piece of hardware, it's very exciting, but it's maybe not quite as far out as some of those first early prototypes, but still a little bit further down the line than we were expecting, right, Heaney?
Yeah, we're seeing something here that is kind of described by Zuckerberg as not just some random prototype that's from a lab, but he specifically talked about it being a higher priced product. So it is a product of some sort. He did note, if anyone wasn't watching at the time, that this is not the Oculus Quest 3. He specifically said it is not a Quest successor. And he even referred to the Quest line as a separate thing here. So, while we've been using the term Quest Pro, as Jimmy says, based on firmware leaks that use that name, it looks like that was probably just a shorthand name that Facebook's been using. And based on the way Zuckerberg's describing this could be Oculus something else, an actual distinct product line from Quest. So whereas Quest is this kind of affordable, low-cost gaming-focused device, what we could be seeing here is something that is more focused on professionals and creatives and businesses that need some of the features that are outlined. And, the features that were described for this are eye tracking, face tracking, a more compact design using pancake lenses. And what am I forgetting? the final feature.
Was the body tracking mentioned in there, or the color
It-
pass through?
It was not, yes, but you're right. It is high. Their exact words were high resolution colored pass through. So if you have an Oculus Quest 2 or an Oculus Quest, you'll know that when you're in the pass through mode for setting up Guardian, or now for, as was announced, mixed reality apps, it's a very low resolution black and white view. But with this headset, as we saw in some of the quick previews that were shown after it, there will be a high resolution full color view. So as well as the virtual reality apps that we all use today, you'll have mixed reality apps that take place in your living room. And it's actually interesting to talk about that because we saw a preview earlier in the keynote of Facebook's mixed reality SDK, which apps will be able to use. And I'm trying to bring up the image here. Can you bring it up by chance, Jimmy? Mine's not really loading.
I'll give it a look.
It should be just on the page past the quotes. And
Cool.
that SDK will allow developers at launch just to show pass-through as the background layer, or on a section such as this desk could be a pass-through to the real world, so you can see a real desk. But Facebook have said that soon there will be spatial anchors, so you can mark a specific position in your room, and the app will remember that the next time you come up. So you could have a virtual television on a specific part of your wall. And then coming next year, Facebook has said there will be a feature called scene understanding. And that's not automatic, but how it will work is you go around your room and you mark out with your controllers, or presumably your hands as well, your 4 walls. Then you select your ceiling height, and then you also mark out the boundaries of your furniture. And that will allow these mixed reality apps to take place in your room in a much more realistic way, including occlusion. So virtual characters and objects will go behind your couch, for example, when they are supposed to be behind it rather than just being in front. So it looks like, while this is kind of, arguably to some people going to be a bit of a gimmick on Quest 2 with those low resolution black and white cameras, on this new headset, whatever it eventually is called, with those color cameras, it looks like it could be a real serious use case and provide some compelling non-virtual reality apps.
And for our audio listeners, I brought up this picture of this hollowed little blue alien. Was that who you meant, Heaney? Was this the image you meant?
Yeah, there's another one as well, but that one shows that you can see that on the bottom hand, this is the person's real room. That is a black and white view of their real rug. And as it tapers off into the distance, that is a mixed reality, a virtual reality environment that is blended in. And that's possible with the scene understanding feature coming next year, because the user will have beforehand marked where their wall is. It's not an automatic feature, although perhaps on the new headset it is. We haven't heard anything about that one way or the other.
So the thing
I'm reading Andrew Bosworth's note on Facebook about the change of the company name. He says that his department will now be called Reality Labs, and so it's Meta Reality Labs.
So it is just Connect as well. It's just Connect and just Reality Labs.
And when I think about MRL, like Meta Reality Labs, MRL has like a ring to it as far as like a markup language for technology going forward. So we'll see.
But to confirm, it's not MRL. It's just Reality Labs.
Andrew Bosworth is in charge of Reality Labs, I assume, for Meta.
He would have said, like, they always put FRL and they always put Facebook in front of Reality Labs whenever they mention it. So it seems like
MetaQuest. Wow.
Well, so let's get back to Cambria and talk about that. The most surprising thing about this for me was the mention that they led with the sentence, "This is not an Oculus Quest." It wasn't even just, "It's not Oculus Quest 3." It's this is not an Oculus Quest. And then to Heaney's point, later on in that section, they also said that they mentioned the Quest product line. It's very surprising to me.
To be clear, the Oculus name is dying. It's gone. They are killing.
We don't know about that yet.
No, Andrew Bosworth, the quote from his line is
this on his
soon
Facebook
you'll
page?
see a shift from her Oculus to Horizon Home, Horizon Venues. We'll start to see the shift from Oculus Quest from Facebook to Meta Quest, and Oculus app to Meta Quest app. That's Andrew Bosworth's words.
So they're calling it Meta Quest from now on?
Yeah, the Meta Quest app.
Okay, well, so the Quest name is staying, though, and that's interesting because my immediate thought to this thing was, like, before the announcement, I was like, well, if this thing improves the comfort and then has like maybe a few extra features but can still run the entire Quest library, to me, as someone that uses VR basically every day, that's going to be a thing I will easily jump in on. But if you're making it a separate product category from Quest, are we starting all over again with a content library? And
Well,
are we selling to consumers? Go for it.
No, he did specifically say that it would support the Quest content library. I think
Oh,
it's
okay,
using
good.
the same software and the same content library. It's just as a piece of hardware, it's not on the same line. This is not a low-cost device that is designed primarily for gaming. It is, his specific term was, a higher end price device. So this is, as we've been speculating for the past few weeks based on this thing's specs, this is not something that is going to come in at, just $100 more than Quest 2 or $150. This is going to be something that is very clearly in its own price range. We've heard that it's going to use pancake lenses, which means it may either be using expensive small displays or perhaps even micro displays. And the latter there would significantly drive up the cost, though at the advantage of quite a significant increase in clarity based on the pixel density of those displays.
Why do you think we didn't hear more about it today? Because based on the leaks we've seen, and that goes right down to the controllers, which at this point you would probably say we've seen quite extensively through leaked materials. And again, Heaney, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we saw at all in what was shown today. Why aren't they coming out with something a bit more definitive on the product today?
Well, I think as
they got to get people used to calling it the Meta Quest. I don't know. Why would you name your new product when you've got to get everyone used to calling Oculus Quest 2 Meta Quest?
I mean, I just want to point out that Andrew Bosworth very specifically said at the start of the year, in April, that this is not launching, that the Pro model, whatever it may be called, was not launching this year. And, a lot of people seem to conveniently ignore that in the past few weeks and decide that it was going to launch anytime soon. But he said it is not happening this year. So I think we don't really need to explain that because he already said it's not happening this year.
No, sure. It's just, we've got, I felt like we were kind of past the days of like early glimpse at prototypes just because all of the hardware they show now is near final and finished. And this does have the air of something that feels near final. But I'm guessing, even with the Quest launch, the original Quest launch, that was something that back at that Oculus Connect, they said would be launching the following spring. This sounds like, with no mention of a window, this sounds like something that we might not even properly see launched by next Connect. Would you agree with that, Ian?
I don't know about that. I think Facebook or Meta. Gosh, I'm gonna hate doing this.
You get a free pass this podcast, and
yeah,
then after
I know.
that,
All right, so
the real challenge begins.
Yeah, Meta is in a knife fight with one of the largest companies on the planet, Apple, and they're not going to take 1 minute longer to ship this product than they have to. Like they need to beat Apple in defining this next era of computing. And I think they're going to get it out as soon as they possibly can. And I just don't know where they are in actually securing the components they need for this future product. They gave as much detail as I think they could right now, but they're still, I just distinctly remember like sort of the building of the iPhone, hearing this anecdote back in the day that like only weeks before the iPhone was set to ship, they pulled out the phone from a pocket and it was all scratched up. The screen was all scratched up from like keys that were in one of the executives' pockets, maybe in Steve Jobs' pocket. And it's like, why is the glass on the front of this all scratched? And they like swapped out the screens or the glass you used, not pretty far into the development of that device. And that could all that sort of thing could still happen with wherever we are with this device.
It's interesting to bring up the whole Apple thing because the rumors around the Apple VR headset, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, Heaney. The latest stuff was that when they go with their first immersive device, it's probably going to be a VR headset mainly with some AR features. And that's going to be a very expensive thing. And at the time that was announced, the Quest 2 was kind of, well, not announced, but the time we first heard that reported, Quest 2 was kind of fresh on the market. The $300 price point was so striking to us that we all thought, yeah, of course, the thing's dead in the water. But suddenly, a high-end Apple device paired with Cambria seems a bit more feasible to me. Heaney, would you agree with that?
Yeah, and to be clear, the Apple device is kind of rumored to be an opaque headset like VR headsets, but it is actually rumored that its main use case will be mixed reality. So it looks like in many ways it will be similar to the short preview we saw of Cambria's color high resolution pass through. Just to go back on that point of, why haven't they given a lot of detail yet, or even why did they announce it at all if they weren't going to? I think it's precisely because it is this different product line. Nobody's going to, based on what they kind of clearly said, no one's going to think this thing is going to replace the Quest 2. They don't really have to worry about that effect of killing their own sales because they've presented it like this. But it's probably a problem more of the global chip supply shortage right now, where I don't think Facebook could definitively give a launch month if they wanted to, because they wouldn't be sure whether there'll be last minute component issues. If anyone who's tried to purchase new hardware products launched this year in 2021 will know that a lot of these companies will come out in the last 2 months and say, sorry, we just haven't been able to predict what was going to happen here with supply chains. We're going to push it out 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. There's things that I ordered earlier this year that were supposed to come, October, November, and they're all giving me now dates of April, May, and into the summer. Thankfully, we heard from AMD's CEO just last month that she expects the global chip supply shortage will be a thing of the past by late 2022. So hopefully then we start to get more concrete details from these products, and hopefully then we start to get smaller companies able to launch their products at scale to compete with the likes of Meta.
Now, this is probably a really hard thing to do, and it's probably pointless, but given the features we heard are in Cambria today, and given the fact we know that, you get an entry-level Oculus Quest 2 at $300, how big of a price jump do you think people should be expecting here? Do you think we're going to go into 600 territory, 900 territory, above 1,000? Is that possible, Heaney, do you think?
I think we're looking at somewhere between $600 and $1,000, and that's what I've been saying for a while, just based on the specs we see in this and looking at kind of the price that smartphones and tablets end up costing when they add some of these extra components, and what we've seen some of the products that have already launched with pancake lenses be priced at. I think when you take all these capabilities together and you take the fact that they don't really have to subsidize this specific line, that Zuckerberg said that he wants to continue subsidizing or selling at cost the Quest hardware, but distinguishing this from Quest means that they have a position there to perhaps even make a profit on this if that's something they're interested in doing.
So I'm Jorge's comment. Anyone else struggling to cope with the death of Oculus as a brand? It's so sad. End of an era. And you guys, we actually watched this live on our show today of us sort of processing that it really is dead, because the language there at the end of their talk was so they didn't quite make it clear, and they waited to the last possible second to kind of like rip that Band-Aid off. And yeah, I feel bad that like Oculus is gone, that name is dead. And I wonder if it was ever in contention as a rebrand, because like I don't understand throwing out all that goodwill that all these people who have Oculus Quests in their homes now and are loving those devices. Like, I don't know anyone that's going and buying those headsets and going that it didn't actually deliver on its promise. Like Gear VR and Go and Rift, they all had those drawbacks. But anyone getting a Quest, it's like, yeah, it's actually delivering on this thing, and it's incidental that it's part of this larger organization. They could have gone with Oculus across the company, in my opinion. And I don't know, seeing the Meta name and thinking like, I wonder how much of this is Mark Zuckerberg wanting to put his stamp on what his company actually becomes, rather than like looking at what people in the community actually like about the stuff that he does. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and it does tie back into the idea that this year's Connect was not those short, sharp hits like the reveal of the Quest 2 a couple of years ago, but these bigger, long-term things. And in some ways, it's a frustrating show to watch, because that they're kind of speaking in riddles and dancing about these subjects because, like we said, if you are getting rid of Facebook accounts or giving you another option in, that's kind of an admission of defeat. If you're going to be changing the Oculus name, that's something that you've said multiple times over the past couple of years that you are not going to be doing. Something that is probably then almost certainly not going to end up having the Oculus name on it when it's finally released is, I have no idea if I'm saying this right, but Project Azria, I think it was, which is the code name they gave today to their first consumer AR glasses. The thing about this announcement to me was that correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I really don't think we actually saw anything too new here with this section. We didn't see any hardware, and we got like a look at some software that was kind of like the usual AR stuff you see. Like someone played some games for a little bit, chatted to friends in a virtual world a lot, in the real world a lot, like me and Ian once did with the alt space avatars in HoloLens 2. And there was like some like flat screen apps virtualized for chatting and stuff like that too. But as far as I'm aware, Ian, I don't think we actually saw anything too new from Project Azria today, right?
You got this little tag here, simulation footage, and on their AR stuff, they show like the images aren't fully opaque, kind of like recognizing that that's going to be a persistent issue for the foreseeable future when you've got transparent optics. Heaney and I go back and forth on this a long time, and I really wonder how many years of like, yeah, AR is in the offing. We've still got to put a supercomputer inside the bezel of glasses. We'll get back to in 2 years' time. Like, how many years of that are we in for still, Heaney?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. As we've said many times in this show, this idea that these AR glasses that everyone wants that are going to be, lightweight and have a wide field of view and have a battery life that lasts all day and track positionally as you go around your daily commute. For now, it really is just science fiction. There is no viable technology path that anyone has outlined to actually ship a product that ticks all the boxes without being horribly compromised in one way. And so I think it was Project Nazari is how this was pronounced. This one, though I may be wrong. Nazari, okay. As NA
chat if you know
ARE or something like that. But yeah, it's interesting to see.
I've got a few emails in my inbox. Let me see if I can find the name in there.
Yeah, I think it was Nazari. Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting to see that, it says simulated footage. We see something here that looks wide field of view, but I wonder once we actually get more details, whenever or if ever we do, what kind of field of view does this device really have? And, as we've also said a few times in this show, what it looks like in the near term you're going to have is these two very separate category of devices. One is your kind of more bulky at-home headset that, today we call them VR headsets, but as they get mixed reality capabilities, maybe we'll just call them headsets or something like that. And that's going to be for when you're at your home, when you're in a work environment, when you want to have an immersive experience where in mixed reality, objects are opaque, not transparent like we see here, where you have a wide field of view, where you have a lot of computing power for things like games and multitasking. And then you'll have this separate category for this portable device you take around, these glasses, AR glasses that can provide a basic experience, and they can pin objects in the world like this. But as Ian's pointed out, because this is a transparent optic system, you're going to have these kind of see-through translucent holograms in your world. And once you're outdoors in a bright sun or another environment where there's artificial lighting, that's going to be an even dimmer and even more translucent hologram. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how many years are we really off from this product. The latest supply chain rumors suggest Apple is currently targeting 2025, but isn't even optimistic about that. So, is Facebook's product also 4 years out? Maybe, possibly. It'll be interesting to see.
It feels like, as long as I've been covering this industry, it feels like that the myth of AR is always being pushed just a couple more years out. And like I said, like it really didn't feel like we got too much new this year. Like we got a code name, but we still didn't see any hardware or anything like that. I was writing news when Michael Abrash was talking. I think he got a much shorter segment this year. I think he only got about 10 minutes or so. Does anyone have any cliff notes on what he announced, or should we just move on to the next thing? Because I didn't catch any of it.
I think it was an update mostly on just codec avatars and some of the fundamental technologies that they're working there. They alluded to their EMG. It's EMG? Is that the right term, Heaney?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they gave an update on their wrist-based input mechanism where you've got this thing that's a band on your wrist, and potentially you could do things like make a grip gesture, pull back, and feel something on your wrist to convince you that you're actually pulling back a bow. And then when you release that, you could actually release the string on the bow and fire off a bow and arrow with just feeling something on your wrist, not having an open hand. And then they obviously also showed some of their advanced ideas where you could actually just kind of like type out or write out all your text right on your own leg. And those are kind of like the input modalities that they are thinking about over the time frame that we need for those AR glasses.
Yeah, so from what I saw, there wasn't actually anything new here. I got to say, this is the most disappointing Abrash talk of any Kinect we've seen so far. The codec avatars shown was just the same codec avatars we've seen before. The footage actually shown is, you can find it on our YouTube channel. If you scroll back and search the word photorealistic, you'll find all of that footage in a compilation. The wrist-based EMG stuff, we also reported on that back when it was detailed earlier this year. And so there may have been a few other little things that were new, but those two things are actually just more of a recap of everything that's been announced already. So I wonder what Abrash is going to be kind of showing, or is he focused on some project that Facebook doesn't want to talk about yet because it actually has a viable path to a commercial product and it doesn't want to tip off its competitors?
And I feel like, aren't we at the 5-year point now? Maybe even a little further past it, where Abrash made his 5-year predictions, or is that something he did last year? Because there was a great talk he did where he was mentioning, the size of a field of view we should expect in 5 years from now. But I feel like we kind of reached that point, and he hasn't checked in on them, or I might have be misremembering what happened last year as well.
No, so the thing I want to add here on Abrash is if Facebook is finally ready to transition some of its projects from research projects to actually going into their products, why would you signal all that to Apple and Google?
Yeah, that's what I meant by the competitors, not tipping off competitors.
Yeah. Well, no,
so
go for it.
Sorry, I was just going to answer your question on Abrash. So yes, in 2016, he gave his predictions of what he expected high-end VR to look like in the year 2021, which we are currently in. Now, we haven't reached those specs yet. It was 4K by 4K per eye. It was 140 degrees field of view, and it was a very focal display, so you wouldn't just have fixed focus. But what he did say the year after was that he was too optimistic and that he would like to kind of push that out a few years. And then the year after that, he said, okay, yet again, I was too optimistic about this, and just kind of said, it'll come eventually, but I'm not going to put any more dates on things. So, that was an era in 2016 when Facebook was releasing a system that cost $800 when you included the controllers and required a high-end gaming PC. So I think the focus of the entire kind of product line was so different. If Facebook had stayed in this kind of PC VR oriented company and tried to scale that up through whatever way possible, and they were still launching these products that cost, $800 all in or something similar to that, maybe we would have seen those sort of specs arrive by 2021. But there was almost a definitive reset when Oculus Quest came out, where they went below in some specs, such as the refresh rate, what even the 2016 Rift was, and kind of started the whole thing over again for standalone. So it'll be interesting to see if we hear predictions from Abrash about what he expects in products again. But given that this is a real business now, actually shipping millions of headsets and hundreds of millions in content, I doubt we'll hear anything so specific ever again.
We're getting like near to the end of like the list of things I've got to talk about today. But something I wanted to just kind of open up the floor really to talk about was the multitude of SDK updates we got today. We kind of already touched on some of that earlier about like access to pass-through and what that's going to mean for headsets in the future. One of the really interesting things is also the update to avatars, right, Ian? That's something that, correct me if I'm wrong, is getting like Unity developers will be getting access to those avatars in the very near future.
Yeah, so
Ian,
this
what
is
do you think?
Heaney. Heaney, when are we going to have the 2.0 avatars in this studio? And will we always have 1.0 avatars
You
as an
can't
option?
ask him for studio updates right now. It's not a
So-
meeting, it's a podcast.
Yeah. So earlier this year, Facebook released a private beta of its new avatar system. And what we're currently using here is Oculus Avatars 1.0. And I say 1.0 because that's what Facebook calls them. But really, these are actually version 3 of Facebook's avatars. In 2016, they were monochromatic. So you just had, you were entirely green with no real details, or you were entirely blue. And the eyes were always covered. You could never choose to have no face wear. You had to choose sunglasses or a VR headset or something. And then when Oculus Go released in 2018, they added skin tone. So you could no longer be a monotone avatar, which some people wanted to be. So they were quite disappointed. But it's still, you had a skin tone then, but it still kept that face wear on. In 2019, they updated to these avatars that we see today. So they added simulated eye tracking. It just follows objects that you as a developer mark in the room by gaze priority. And this simulated lip sync that you can see. It's just machine learning model processing our audio to come up with the most plausible lip sync output. And what we've now seen in these new avatars that shipped as a private beta earlier this year is a complete overhaul of that system. It is not related in any way. And they kind of take this slightly too realistic, slightly creepy style and go for a much more cartoony, animated style as the likes you would see in Apple Memoji and kind of Snapchat's Bitmoji. And only 3 or 4 apps were actually given access to that so far. But what was announced today is that in December, all Unity developers will have access to these new Facebook avatars. And if one of you two could cast the picture, it would be great. One of the images was
Sorry,
uploaded
my
today.
mind keeps escaping me. I will do
It's
that
all good.
right now.
It's just that my one is broken because I was testing an update on it and forgot to uninstall it. But yeah, so what's different is that it looks more cartoony, but also that it has inverse kinematic arms. You don't just have your floating hands, you have a prediction of where your elbows might be. And in the preview of the future higher priced headset, it looked like they hinted at those avatars also being able to support face and eye tracking from hardware. So Unreal Engine support is supposed to come next year in 2022. And just to answer Ian's question, yeah, we plan to support those avatars and also Wolf 3D's Ready Player Me avatars for people who prefer those, or so that we can support other non-Facebook headsets, because we actually have OpenXR support in this app now. So we can port to other headsets such as Lynx, which is probably the first other headset we'll port to, because it's the only other standalone headset at a reasonable practical price that is sold towards consumers.
Yeah. There you are, getting the scoop on the latest with the UploadVR studio. It's our own Upload conference today, and we've got all the big announcements.
So I saw someone in the comments asking, why don't we build this on Horizon? Why isn't our studio on Horizon? And I think it's such a great question because Andrew Bosworth himself kind of alluded to this idea that it benefits Facebook to open up layers of development at different tiers. If you need access to the strength of the entire hardware platform, maybe use Unity. If you if you don't know how to code, maybe you go to Horizon and start putting shapes together and learning how to use visual scripting and going through all those tutorials there. And then there's also, of course, the WebXR kind of layer of development that you could put things into a headset with WebXR. And so what you've got there are like 3 different layers that you could choose to be a developer for Meta's platform or Meta's headsets, depending how you want to get it out to the world. And our particular application here, Heaney has picked a really, really great layer to kind of develop because, yeah, it'd be cool to do this in workrooms. Like, it would be really nice to be able to have my entire PC, to be able to cast up onto Stevie anything that's on my desktop that I want. But there's also the very real possibility that Facebook is going, or Meta is going to release that particular tool as an API that we add to our studio built in Unity. But yeah, there's advantages of kind of building software at different layers in this ecosystem. And Facebook is kind of trying to open up multiple layers where you can build for them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm really excited to see when we can get the studio on other platforms because, you know, a bit about what Ian was talking about there and having the studio in Horizon. I just personally don't want that. You know, it's one of those big problems, and why we're so lucky to have Heaney here at Upload is that, you know, all these cool platforms that we come on and talk about different services and what different companies are doing. We want to remain as impartial as possible at the end of the day on all of those. And if we're using Horizon to come in every week and talk about Facebook, that's something for me that I think I would also have a bit of a problem with, just being there and saying, hey, look at this great Facebook app we're using to talk about, you know, all the issues we have with Facebook, and that might insert a layer of distrust between us and our audience. So I don't think that's something we're super interested in for now, at least.
Yeah, for sure. And you couldn't build something like this in Horizon Worlds if that's what you're referring to. Facebook rebranded, you know, their general social rec room competitor style thing to Horizon Worlds. You know, we have features in this such as a YouTube web view so that we can see your comments here. We have the ability to bring in notes that we have saved. We can record from these virtual cameras, and these virtual cameras switch from person to person. None of these things are possible within something like Horizon. Maybe with visual scripting languages that are being added to Rec Room and VR Chat and Horizon in future, it'll be possible, and maybe eventually all that functionality will arrive. But it's simply not something that's practical in the short term. And just to answer, sorry, I'm just going to answer on Akazi's question here. No, we're not using a visual scripting package. This is just C#.
Yeah, so the thing I just want to add there is like the vision that Meta just unleashed, that Zuckerberg just unleashed, about how you can kind of have a call start on Messenger and you can invite people and have people like across different devices. That's something we need as like journalists and as a studio. Like, we would love to have kind of like a floating head camera version where people could call in from other platforms. But we have to pick kind of like the right layer to develop that technology and get it on the right headsets for it to be useful, or build the right package for people to actually get into our call. But like, we are like, at some point we will have a system here where like you can talk to people outside of our studio via Stevie or something like that. But what you're kind of viewing with our studio here is that we're at the fundamental limit of like what we can do with current generation platforms and technology. And what Zuckerberg and Bosworth have just outlined is they need to have interoperability. They need to make it easier for us to do exactly what we just described in order for like those billion people to be wearing these headsets by the end of this decade.
I'm going to drop to the lowest, easiest level of news to talk about just last, which is the content announcements we had today, which isn't... what do you want to talk about, Heaney?
Did you not say we wanted to cover the SDKs?
Sorry, I didn't know if between the pass-through access and the avatars we might have covered it, but I guess you want to talk about like the speech recognition, right? And that's an important thing, and then a couple of other features. Tell us what we should be excited about, Heaney.
Yeah, there's only 3 other things. This won't take long. It's just that they also announced that as well as giving developers those mixed reality features we talked about, and as well as those new avatars that some apps already have, will be available to everyone, developers will also get access to, as you say, a speech recognition API. And this, Facebook says this will enable things like searching for content in media apps, or for games it will enable, as they say, voice-driven gameplay, such as casting spells by just saying the word, or talking to NPCs in a way that right now requires, pointing and clicking at some sort of dialogue tree. And I actually think that speech recognition is going to be one of those things that we see developers do things we could never even imagine with. I think once you give the kind of creative, passionate VR development community a tool like that, they're going to be able to deliver things that gamers and normal VR app users combined are going to really, really love. And I think especially in VR where you don't have this keyboard in front of you and you don't have this kind of way to input text, something like that is going to allow so many different use cases. And as people are pointing out here, Harry Potter like spells. The other thing was a tracked keyboard API. Currently, you can track a specific Logitech keyboard in the Quest home environment, and you can use it in the browser. But they've announced that next year, every developer will get that. So, for example, Guy Godin, who I hope is still watching, should be able to next year support that so that you can see your keyboard within virtual desktop. And think of how much that's going to supercharge those sort of productivity apps and any app where you're inputting large amounts of text. And the last one was that they are adding a hand interaction library for Unity so that developers can very easily add grabbing and poking and other kind of two-handed and one-handed interactions with virtual objects. They say it'll support controllers and hand tracking, and they say you can use it with other interaction frameworks or none, or just pick and choose the parts you want. So it'll be interesting to see how that helps indie developers and people learning to develop for VR to build experiences where you're really interacting with the objects in your environment rather than being in that sort of frustrating situation where you go to pick something up on a table and nothing happens.
And something I know, Ian, you've often talked about is the idea that was the metaverse, or the idea of the metaverse, does it start with an engine, right? Like a video game engine where you're standardizing all of these practices. And it seems like these API announcements today kind of bring us a little bit further towards that, right? Like these are all kind of components that we've all been asking for, and now we're going to be able to see them across a wider variety of apps, and we'll start to see VR development not just in Horizon, but also like across everything that releases on a Quest or beyond right now, will start to look a little more uniform in some ways, right?
So there was this comment that Bosworth said that like the mobile internet, or what we have now, is platforms on platforms on platforms. So like mobile web is on the iOS platform. You've got your browser, then it's on top of the platform itself, like the operating system, and then you've got the chip layer and all these things that like Meta is coming for your margins. If you're at any layer in that stack, from the engine to the chip to they're trying to drill down as far as they can to provide as much technology as they can, so that they can cut out a piece for everyone that wants to be part of their version of the metaverse. So like if you make an avatar or you make a virtual accessory, maybe you get a little piece of this very large pie that they hope to see a decade from now. But unless Facebook is actually building all the fundamental layers of the technology all the way down, Facebook is having to shell out money to someone else, and they can't actually give that money back to whoever they want to be part of their ecosystem. And so Facebook needs to make itself available to developers at every different layer. And one of those fundamental layers is like Unity and Unreal. They're doing their own thing. Epic Games is doing its own metaverse with Fortnite, its own version of this. It's getting to the same place. And these companies are going to have to figure out how to interoperate. And it's like, I don't know, we really are. I do feel like we're in for like, I always remember like when Blu-ray and was it HD DVD? Was that what the other brand was called before Blu-ray took off? Where you've got both companies investing, both of these groups investing at enormous levels until someone gets in the room with someone else and says, okay, we'll take this percentage. And then the other format just dies. Like that's the type of meetings that are going to happen in the next year between Epic and Unity and Meta and Apple and all these companies are going to have these conversations about how do we actually get this stuff to work together without ceding too much ground.
Okay, you've had an hour. You have to let me talk about video games now.
Can we talk
in my contract?
Grand Theft Auto? You've kept on to it this long. Like, how excited are you?
Pretty damn excited. I think, like, the thing about, so if you missed the news, San Andreas, the third PS2 game in the Grand Theft Auto 3 trilogy, is coming to Oculus Quest 2. There was no gameplay shown today, but there was no, like, I mean, you can kind of imagine what they're going to be doing with it, right? If you've played the Resident Evil 4 remake or remaster in VR from earlier this month, that was a third-person game. They took into first person and tried to, like, stick as much VR interaction in there as they could do. This, to me, sounds significantly more ambitious than even Resident Evil 4, right? Because the whole thing about San Andreas is it's a giant open world. I think one of the criticisms of it at the time was that it might be too big because there were just large spaces with nothing to do in it. But I think this is a really, really cool move. I think Facebook is totally making the right decision in terms of, or Meta, sorry, is totally making the right decision in terms of picking out this kind of era of games, like identifying the classics and bringing them over to VR. I think that's a really winning formula. I think they did a great job with Resident Evil 4. This is going to pose some more challenges, I think, because San Andreas is kind of a very ugly game for starters. It is getting a remaster on PS4 and PS5 as well, but I don't know how much of that work will translate over to the Quest version.
I think and then we're going to be talking quite a lot of platforms, including Switch, isn't it? Or am I?
Yeah, it is coming to Switch actually, which is a great point. So maybe there is a lot of work under the hood there to get like some of those updates onto Quest 2 as well. But then you're also talking about things like, that's a game where you do a lot of transitioning from standing to seating as you get onto a bike or a plane. Also, again, another game with a lot of cutscenes, and one of the biggest criticisms of Resident Evil 4 was the fact that you were constantly cutting away to cutscenes, and I would like to think there's a way around that, or to make it a bit more immersive. And also, that's the thing that excites me the most about that is those games are games I have kind of somewhat infamously always struggled with because they were incredibly ambitious for the time, and I always thought the control schemes, especially when you were on foot, couldn't quite hold up. Like, aiming with a weapon was really, really tough. The idea that you could go back into San Andreas now in VR and have all the control that VR provides you is really, really exciting to me. Did I review ever play San Andreas back in the day?
Yeah.
Did you like it?
I thought you were gonna keep. I thought it was just a
no.
point. Yeah, no. I enjoy all the Grand Theft Auto games. I enjoy open world games like that. I'm excited to see how it works on Quest. As you say, the biggest game design consideration is that transition between seated and standing. But we've seen indie developers on Steam VR come up with very creative solutions to that. That I think, I hope we'll see in GTA VR. But sometimes you don't really see those creative VR design decisions brought into those bigger games. And what I'm hoping is that at some point, hopefully from this, we do start to see that, because it's not an unsolvable problem, and there are more clever ways around it than to just have you seated but still standing up in your room so that the floor of the car is in the middle of your space rather than on the ground. So I hope we'll see it.
So, yeah, the thing I want to add there is John Carmack earlier this year alluded to this idea that they could have system-wide sim sickness mitigation. How would I put it? Like systems in place so that maybe, the screen shrinks down if you're moving really fast. Things like all those standard movement options are there for you to use in various ways. And then, of course, they also purchased Big Box VR, right? And I'm curious if I'm curious how this actual deal went down, and actually, like, can you actually run on the headset, number one, and how much is Facebook actually helping Rockstar able to achieve this, of actually getting this whole system to run?
Well, the thing they did with Resident Evil 4 was that it went to a developer called Armature, who did the sports scramble games, and had had done HD remasters in the past, but had never been involved with, the actual fundamental development of a Resident Evil game. So it was entirely an in-house thing for Facebook, with Capcom coming and approving decisions that they were making. Is my understanding of how that process worked, and you got to assume that will be the same here, probably.
So was San Andreas the game that we saw on a stationary treadmill very early on, and then a person was like using a machine gun while walking around on the treadmill and just mowing down pedestrians?
I'm pretty sure
early
that's
on in
still
VR?
5. Like 5 is really that old that I think it
Mm.
was one of the first games that people were really modding to get in there. And yeah, I remember seeing it on a treadmill. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember 5 is
but-
one of those games that got a re-release to the last generation consoles and originally released on the last generation. It's been
Yep.
around for a while.
Yeah, and is coming to PS5 again next year. So, which hopefully, fingers crossed, that will also be a game that considers VR to some degree.
All right, so I mean, I gotta. I'm sorry. I'm gonna ask the question here. Are you gonna have streetwalkers of both genders, or will they remove the streetwalkers entirely from the game?
Oh, right. So you think they would? You can't. You can't. That's like the fundamental DNA of GTA. Is that you do whatever the heck you want when you're not in a mission. If you're just calling it the empty mission simulator, that's not going to go down well. I mean, it's an interesting point because, to your point, Resident Evil 4 is different from the original version. Facebook has cut out the bits that Facebook didn't like, and that caused some controversy for sure. But if you're making a deal to go to get GTA and you're not on board with the fundamentals of what GTA is, you're probably leaving that one at the table in the first place anyway, right? Like there are other games you could have gone to, much less ambitious games that would still been as big of a win, that you wouldn't have to fundamentally alter. So even though I know what you mean, I really can't see them doing that. That would be an upset of an enormous degree.
Yeah, I think
We'll
there's
see. That's going to be an interesting one. They're gonna hold that one off until the actual week of release. They can.
Well, there's
I
a
think
showcase
this
coming up.
distinction between what the characters are saying. In Resident Evil 4, we didn't see gameplay itself censored. It's what the characters are saying, and so you can kind of say, "Oh, why are these characters that you've put in said this?" versus just a gameplay action that you can do. So I feel like maybe if there are missions that use kind of language that someone at Meta might object to, we might see censorship in that. But as to whether they would remove entire kind of gameplay possibilities, it seems unlikely. But it does touch on this bigger question of, what is the difference between fantasy and reality, and where does that line start to cross? And I don't think we're anywhere near the level of graphics or immersion yet that we have to really seriously start worrying about people not being able to tell the difference. I think if someone's playing something that looks like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, there's no kind of ambiguity there as to that being something that is entirely fictional and virtual.
To your point about the language, could potentially, I mean, we've all played GTA, could potentially be a much bigger issue here than it was with Resident Evil 4. So that will be something that we really have to ask about. And to moving on to the other games and the other content announcements of the day. Well, Blade and Sorcery is the next big one, which is cool, very ambitious Quest 2 port. I think we all, again, that's a game that really touches on the violence that we can achieve with VR right now and how it's not photorealistic. I'll definitely be interested to see how they pull that one off. It's surprising to that point. It's surprising we haven't seen anything from Stress Level Zero's Quest project, which was now announced, I want to say 2 years ago. But again, plays with the same fundamentals of physics. And just wrapping up, they also announced that Vertigo Games is going to be working with Facebook on 5 new VR games, and they handle a lot of publishing, so I don't think that'll be 5 in-house games from Vertigo, but probably like 3 or 4 at least are probably going to be partnerships. And then they've got Arizona Sunshine, which was announced today as well, to be coming up at releasing on December 9th. And then there's the Oculus Gaming Showcase Oculus Gaming Showcase 2022, which, as a person that plans showcases one of which might be right around the corner. I really hope actually takes place in 2022, but we'll worry about that later. And that's kind of it for the keynote, but we're not done. In an hour and 15 minutes, John Carmack takes the stage for what is sure to be a giant marathon session, talking all things behind the scenes at Facebook. I'm sure he's going to be having excellent anecdotes that will make us all laugh. I'm sure he's going to go ridiculously in depth with things that have happened in the past year and things to come in the future. For the both of you, this isn't the same kind of thing where we can really predict what he's going to say, but what are you most interested to hear from Carmack this year, Ian, to start with, if you have something to lead off the bat with?
I listen very intently when he points out the failures of this organization, the things they could have done better, that they should be doing better, because a lot of what today was about for Mark Zuckerberg was to offer a new North Star to 68,000 employees, and then also all the people that use the service. So like, there's like a new letter from Mark Zuckerberg on like, this is what this company is. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect people. And that's, he's announcing this new vision that that John Carmack himself has actually seen like a preview of. Like, he's been in these discussions, seen the change that they're trying to fundamentally realize at the very core level of this organization. And I'm just curious to kind of see him speak candidly about whether people are going to be comfortable with this. So, I would love to hear the stuff that Andrew Bosworth sort of alluded to, the quote that I threw up there about the question of whether we should have surveillance in the public square. I would love to hear Carmack comment on that. I don't know if he's ever waded into those waters of privacy and how that's going to work in the future, but just once I would love to hear him comment on that and where Facebook lands on those things.
He'll probably say something incredibly Carmack along the lines of, even if people are worried about it, he's so rich he'd go do it anyway. But
sorry, well, are we closing up here soon? Are we going to wrap this up?
I'm going to ask Heaney what he thinks as well, and then pretty much wrap up so we can all rest up.
I want one last comment. I want to leave one last thing here. Yeah.
But you got it. It's Heaney's turn in the ring right now. Do it.
I will make one prediction for Carmack. I think he's going to elaborate on what he said in previous years about just how sort of disappointed he is at how long it's taken Facebook to get its social strategy together. I think this is, you've said, Jimmy, you didn't really think there were a lot of big announcements this year, but I think what we've really seen this year is the first time Facebook has given a competent social strategy that actually ties things together and doesn't seem like 5 different teams competing for attention and kind of gravitas have put together and have no thought of really bringing into larger social strategy. I think we may hear Carmack sort of lament all the wasted years where the metaverse could already be being built and where we could be today had Facebook started building something like its Horizon suite years ago, or stuck with one of the great social apps that it built, such as Oculus Rooms on Oculus Go, and just built from there. But what I'm interested to hear him talk about for sure is his views on the technical architecture of the metaverse, because something I've been pointing out every time we've heard of this kind of marketing hype about the metaverse is that I want to hear what it actually really means from a technical level. And it sounds like today we've really got the answer to that it's these apps that are connected by their SDKs and avatars, but they are, at the end of the day, just apps. And while Horizon Worlds will have the ability to build experiences within it and have its own kind of visual scripting language that will improve over time, the real kind of detailed immersive apps that use advanced functionality will remain this app store model, and that's what Facebook currently calls the metaverse. So I want to hear what Carmack thinks about how we could maybe move away from that app model in the longer term future.
All right. So before we move to closing comments, that was the Facebook Connect keynote for this year, 2021, or the Meta Connect keynote, or the Connect keynote. We'll find out next year how we're supposed to call it, I guess. Big day. Facebook has renamed its organization to Meta, with all of its apps falling under that umbrella. We saw the tease of new VR hardware with Project Cambria. We saw the tease of new AR hardware with Project Nazria, I believe it's called. And then we also saw a bunch of updates on the system side, software updates, software development kit updates, new games. We will be covering all of that in depth over the next couple of days. We are on the website, UploadVR.com, with all the latest headlines from today. But to Heaney's point, it seems like an interesting, bold new era today. It might not have been the fast fire headlines, but it definitely was a massive, important moment for Facebook to come out and completely rebrand its company, not just anywhere, but in the VR and AR specific live stream that they do every year. And I think that really does put a nail in how serious and confident they are about where they're going in the next couple of years. And I'll open it up to closing comments. Ian, what do you want to say?
Well, I'm sort of thinking this through live here, so maybe I'll evolve these thoughts over time. But I really I keep thinking about this idea of a billionaire test for these headsets, and I think of what kind of computing device does a billionaire want? Like, is it the same kind of device that everyday people out on the street want? What does a person who needs to just get through their day more efficiently actually need? And is it the same exact device that a billionaire who actually measures the usefulness of their time in in how much time they've wasted? Like, what could they be doing to make more money during these during this hour? And I focus on that because Facebook may be focused on making their meetings better. Like, workrooms is where they started this transition in many ways of how can we make a really great meeting solution that solves some of the problems facing Zoom calls and that sort of thing. But there's this other situation that I think about where when you're walking around on the street, there's a certain class of people who would be advantaged by being able to know the information about the people they walk up against. So police would love to know what the names and identity are of everyone they walk around up against. And when you're thinking about a billionaire, it will save them time to not have to go through the niceties of human communication with another human that they walk up to, if they could actually know all the basics about this person before they actually talk to them. And I don't know, I want to just leave the discussion there about where AR glasses might go in the next 5 to 10 years, with that gap that's apparent between what school children need to actually finish their schoolwork and learn what they need to be successful in the world, and what very rich people need to actually do their jobs more efficiently. And I'm really curious to see how what decisions are landed on in the designs for future hardware around that gap between what everyone needs and what very rich people need.
Food for thought. Heaney, do you have closing comments? Excited about anything? Disappointed about anything?
Yeah, well, obviously, I'm deeply disappointed by the killing of the Oculus brand. I don't really understand that decision. As Ian has said, it seems to be a brand that does resonate with people and a brand that people kind of cared about. It seems to make sense if you were making a device about using your eyes. The word Oculus seems like it's a perfect brand for that, but obviously it's going the way of the dodo now. The other thing I was going to say was, I actually can't even remember now, but just on Ian, just on your point about what does a billionaire want versus a normal person, I've always found it interesting that over time we've kind of seen technology flatten, in the sense that if you can buy a $1,200 iPhone Pro Max, even if you had $12,000 or $12 million, you can't get a better iPhone. It's still, because of the way the technology is designed and because of how these things are mass produced, you can't get a better phone. And when you do look at the phones that cost $5,000, and there are a few in the world, they're just smartphones with diamonds encrusted into them. So I like this. I like your kind of thinking on that, but I wonder to what extent they actually will be very similar, what a billionaire wants and needs from these devices versus what someone, just a normal working person, needs from them.
Yeah.
Well, I think
I remembered.
Oh,
sorry,
go for it.
I just did remember. The only last thing I was going to say is it's funny to me how many people in our comments are still saying that the rumor says that Quest 2 Plus will be announced any time today. It's coming.
No.
Sorry to break it to you. There is and never was a Quest 2 Plus. It's not a thing.
Yeah. The Cambria is what you're getting potentially in 2022, and we're probably some way out from Quest 3. This is what it is. Get used to it. This is the future. And that is a good point to wrap it up, I think. Thanks so much for joining me today, guys. We're going to go away. We're going to have about a 65-minute break. And then right here on this channel again, we will be live streaming the John Carmack talk. It'll go on for however long. We'll be sitting, writing frantically, I'm sure. Shout out to our members. I can see Skiva in the chat right now. I can see Robert Canona's in the chat right now. Thanks so much for being here, guys. Thanks so much to all our members and people that subscribe to the channel and follow along with this. We do this podcast basically every Monday. It's called the VR Download. And then today is meant to be the VR Gamescast, but this kind of thing happened, so we had to talk about all this stuff instead. But we'll probably be back next Thursday. I say probably because I'm terrible at keeping to a schedule, but I will try to be back next Thursday with the VR Gamescast with Xena. Again, head to UploadVR, subscribe to the channel below, leave comments, and we'll see you soon for more coverage. Thanks so much for stopping by. Do you think Xena knows I told her to go? I signed off. I should text Xena. This is behind the scenes stuff right now.